they are not allies as we would understand it in the West. They are partners of convenience. Russia needs money from oil.
So President Xi did not hold back during the military parade in Beijing today, where he unveiled high-tech laser weapons, nuclear missiles and underwater drones during an unprecedented display of force. The Chinese president was joined by his Russian and North Korean counterparts, Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un, during the event, which was supposedly to mark 80 years since the end of the Second World War. Well, President Trump was hosting the president of Poland at the White House, but he was asked whether he had been in touch with President Putin.
Well, I'm having a conversation with him very shortly, and I'll know pretty much what we're going to be doing. We've taken very strong action, as you know, and in other ways we've taken very strong action. But I'll be speaking to him over the next few days, and we're going to see.
With who, sir?
I'm going to know exactly what's happening.
Mr.
But I'm not happy with all the people. You got 7,819 people killed last week. I have no message to President Putin. He knows where I stand, and he'll make a decision one way or the other. Whatever his decision is, we'll either be happy about it or unhappy. And if we're unhappy about it, you'll see things happen.
Well, let's talk to Dr. Donald Jensen, who's a former diplomat at the US Embassy in Moscow and adjunct professor at the Johns Hopkins University. Good evening to you, Dr. Jensen.
Well, thank you for having me.
Good to have you with us. We heard President Trump. I felt that those were rather familiar comments. I'm going to be speaking to him. I'm going to making it clear we don't want these deaths to continue. What did you make of it?
Well, I think, yes, we've seen President Trump zig and zag since the beginning of his administration. I think there is as they say, a secular change in the position, even as he says sometimes contradictory things, and that is to a harder line toward Putin. When he talks about he'll talk soon to Putin, when he gives him an ultimatum, I think a lot of people discount that, and I think you should discount that, because what really matters are the hard facts that are going on between the two countries, one of which is that, as you said just a moment ago, President Trump met the Polish president today in Washington, not far from here, and assured Poland that U.S. troops would remain there. Ukraine still receives U.S. assistance. President Trump appears to be not happy about the positions on negotiations by both Putin, and Zelensky. But I do think the administration is going in a certain direction, despite its difficult discerning it sometimes. It is going in a certain direction, and that appears to be a tougher line toward Russia and more pressure on the Kremlin to end the war.
Well, you say it's a tougher line, but I mean, since we had that very high-profile summit between President Trump and President Putin, where he literally rolled out the red carpet for the Russian leader, he has repeatedly said that he's going to speak to him. There were various deadlines for when President Putin was supposedly going to be expected to agree to at least some form of peace talks. None of that has happened. And we certainly haven't seen any further ramping up of sanctions or anything like that, have we?
Well, the evidence is contradictory, as you say, but I would point out that the Trump administration has increased the tariff on India for buying oil, and that's part of the reason why Prime Minister Modi was in China this week. President Trump has kept, as I said, the spigot on for Ukraine arms purchases from the United States. I think one thing you have to keep in mind is that Trump puts a heavy emphasis on personal diplomacy. He puts a heavy emphasis on, as they say, the deal, and he talks about a deal a lot. And I think he's personally offended by the fact that Putin seems to be backtracking on what he appeared to tell him in Alaska. And I don't think President Trump takes kindly to that kind of thing. Will he push pressure on Russia directly, for example, by tightening sanctions? A lot of us hope that he will. It's not happened yet. But again, when I say he's moving in a different direction than, say, 2 months ago, I think you have to look at evidence like the pressure on India. We saw 2 weeks ago before Modi went to China for the summit, the festivities this week.
In the meantime, we've got President Putin there alongside President Xi, Kim Jong-un, in what appears to be an ever-strengthening alliance of anti-Western leaders. And President Putin seems to have said that he is prepared to continue to try to achieve his objectives in Ukraine by military means. I've never ruled out the possibility of a meeting with President Zelensky, but is there any point, he questioned? And it does seem as though President Putin, he's just shown no sign whatsoever since that meeting with President Trump of actually being prepared to seriously try to negotiate a peaceful solution.
Well, I don't think President Putin has fundamentally budged from his position on the war since February 2022 when Russia invaded Ukraine. He seems to be giving mixed signals to Trump, but I would add, I think that the Kremlin pays a great deal of attention to, I won't say manipulating Trump, but to nudge him in a way that they want. They study his psychology. They study that of the other American leaders. And I think part of this is good old-fashioned KGB disinformation to try to get President Trump to have a little less strict line toward Russia. And one of the problems is that you see different people in the U.S. administration giving different interpretations of what's going on. Steve Witkoff on the one hand, Marco Rubio on the other, and this presents an image of I won't say confusion, but of ambiguity about just where this process is going. But we have to keep in mind, as you just said, Putin really hasn't budged very much at all. He talks a good game. He talks partly to influence the Western public opinion about Ukraine and about the war. And as you see in the last couple of weeks, the Russians have been very active, most recently, last Thursday and Friday, claiming Ukraine casualties and claiming that Russia controls more land than it actually does. Now, whether that's disinformation fed by Putin's generals to the Russian president, or whether it's just playing on the Western point of view, Western uncertainty about what's going on, I think both are actually in play. So this drama, let's call it informational warfare, is going on a lot of levels. It's not just on the battlefields in eastern Ukraine.
And in the meantime, we've seen President Putin at this extraordinary parade in China. What did you make of that? This was President Xi just openly putting on display some of these extraordinarily powerful hypersonic missiles. We had the jets overhead, the high-tech drones, and so on. And he's there alongside Kim Jong-un, President Putin, and a host of others from mainly those Eurasian nations that appear to be friendly towards Russia and China.
You're absolutely right, but I think you have to kind of unpack the parade in a couple of ways. One of which is this impressive show by China was partly to intimidate Taiwan and the U.S.'s approach to Taiwan and East Asia, and this flashy stuff he had on the streets, new missiles, as you said, hypersonic weapons, as you said, and to my surprise personally, a very robust drone force. This is partly to show that China is a great power, partly to show that China still threatens and wants Taiwan, just as much as it is about looking westward toward the war in Ukraine and to Putin. I would add, however, and I would respectfully, since we're friends, disagree with the word alliance or partnership between these two countries. They are using each other. Their interests coincide for the time being, at least, and perhaps for a long time being. But their interests coincide. They are not allies, as we would understand it, in the West. They are partners of convenience. Russia needs money from oil, so it's announced this pipeline from Siberia into northern China. That will take 10 or 15 years if it ever works at all. And this is a project that's been talked about for a very long time.
Well,
Putin needs Chinese technical assistance as well.
The line has been dropping out a little bit. Just finally, do you think that what we're seeing here, and it's an important point you make about this partnership of convenience, that Donald Trump's tariffs, his efforts to try to ensure that global trade works to the US advantage has somewhat backfired, because we saw him raise tariffs, for example, on India. India has just getting more of its supplies from Russia and from China. We're seeing, as you heard there, these plans for a new pipeline between Russia and China. It does appear as though the United States enemies are simply finding ways around his efforts to use sanctions against them.
I think it very much does. I wouldn't say backfired. Let's say that these countries are reacting to Trump's very hard line on tariffs. His new sense of what the American national interest is, and Modi's presence in China this week is a key indication of that. You notice how the Indian Prime Minister was not at the military parade. He left because India and China, despite all the nice words this week, have deep differences between them. And as you said, and I agree with you, these are partners, allied, or united, let's say, in a opposition to the liberal international order. And some of the policies that President Trump takes, in their eyes, encourages them, or let's say allows them more discretion to band together to resist what they see as Western hegemony. And that's a word that the Chinese leader used this week. So they are banding together, on the one hand, to resist the Western international order, even though they have disagreements among themselves. Certainly China and India disagree over Ukraine. So they're there as a less than an alliance, but a bloc, to work together where they can, but above all, to diminish Western democratic influence in the global system. And that's really what we're worried about here, not only what happens in Ukraine. This is an alliance of convenience, but it's the rise of an adversarial set of dictator authoritarian states that do control a lot of natural resources. And
Okay.
this bloc is messy, but it will continue.